Hello, everyone, and welcome to this conversation presented by White House Custom Color.
Are you trying to mute me? No, it's just real loud, and I can't.
I sold Amazon, but it was $25.
Listening to listen, not listening to respond.
Yes. Oh, thank you for that.
So the last 10 years has been something like the last decade was something else in this industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there were a few people, like a handful of people that really stand out from this last decade as people that kind of exploded, especially women photographers, especially female photographers, right? You're one of so you're one of those people.
Thanks.
Yeah. I mean, you just are, right? I want to know from you what that was like, because you were really young too when that started. You're still young, but you were really young 10 years ago.
I was, yeah.
What how did that happen? What happened to you?
That sounds so looking back at like, what was the point where you went crazy? Like what happened?
I don't mean it to be akin to that, but maybe it is. Maybe it is.
Totally.
Like, but really, how, what in the world? Seriously.
Wait, I don't want to interrupt you, but are we doing, like, do I need to do any like formal anything introduction, lead in, outro, since we cut it off and it came back in?
Well,
or do you can, at the end?
We won't do a formal one, but you can, I guess you can say who you are.
I don't need to. I just was like, our connection
everybody
got messed
knows,
up, so
everybody knows who you are. So I felt kind of stupid, like doing a formal, and I usually don't do that
totally
stuff
fine.
Anyway. So
no, you don't need to. It's fine. I
just want to know what in the world happened the last 10 years to you. Seriously.
Yeah. Okay. So here's how I look at it. I think that there were two things that helped me succeed kind of in the photo teaching realm. And there's something different in the photo realm as well, like separately.
Okay.
'Cause there's teaching and then there's photography.
There's two separate things,
and
right.
Of course they overlap, but the way you succeed in the two of those are not necessarily joined together. So in the photo teaching world, I think the first part that really helped me is that when I started teaching, I think it came at a time when there was a demand for female speakers that were strong and that had a different point of view. I felt like, and I've been attending photo conferences since I was 14 and 15. So I grew up in upstate New York, and we used to go down to the Photo Plus Expo in New York every year since I was middle of my teens.
Yep.
And, I remember sitting and watching the Canon Explorers of Light. When 14, 15, I would sit there and they would give presentations all day. I would sit there, I would go to the Adobe booth, and especially at the big photo booths, there were no women. Like literally no female speakers, none, not one. And as a young woman, I noticed, and I was definitely raised in a way where my parents were like, whatever you want to do, it does not matter. You're going to do it.
Yeah.
Like we know that you have that. And so when I looked at this, I was kind of looking around saying, what the hell's going on here? Why are there not any women? So I just think I came at a time when there was a good opportunity. People were realizing, oh yeah, maybe female voices are kind of important. Oh, and then here's this young woman that's eager.
Did it make you angry?
No, I wasn't angry. I thought it was stupid because I would go to these events, especially later on, and like at least half were women, and sometimes there were more. And so I was like, how are you not representing your audience? Like it just seems like bad business. And I've always been wired really hardwired for business. I've had the entrepreneurial spirit since I was, again, like that same age. And I was like, this does not seem like good business practice.
Right.
And
it wasn't.
No, but I wasn't angry. I just like, this is ill thought out.
Right.
And I'm gonna throw some shade, but also in the time where I started to speak more and get more opportunities, there were a lot of, and this is not hating, it's just the reality, like older men that were in charge of a lot of these programs that were retiring on their way out, whatever it may be. And you'd get younger people, whether they were male or female,
Right.
that were like, oh yeah, no, we should probably fix this. We should have more female representation. So I think that was certainly one point. Good timing. But I think the other point is I genuinely got into speaking for what I think are the best reasons. It was that I actually took, even though I was young, don't get me wrong, like even though I was young, it took me a long time to get decent. I mean that like completely truthfully. It took me from like, and I'm talking, my life was photography 24/7 from like age 15 to like 22, 23. And like 22, 23 is when I took like some decent portraits. Like it just took me a long time to put it all together. I had a lot of cheese factor. I had like the technique was really weak. And so once I started to figure it out and started to put it together, I wanted to teach people in a way that I wish the education had existed for me. I felt like a lot of the people that had taught me, they overcomplicated things to make themselves sound smarter. And then when it like, so when the bulb, like when the light bulbs went off, I go, well, why didn't they just say that in the first place? In
the 2000s, especially, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's when I learned photography was early 2000s. Yes,
that's, you know what? I don't think anyone has actually brought that up to me in the last few years since I've been doing this, that there was a segment of time in the educational portion of the industry as this huge transition was also occurring, right?
From
film to digital. Exactly. And you had this group of people that almost came across like they held the lease.
Totally.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted to make things. I remember going to like little workshops and stuff and having people get up and speak, I don't know, for a couple hours. And at the end, you'd almost be like,
what did I learn?
I really don't even know what they just said.
Totally.
And I feel like I could summarize it in 3 sentences, right?
Yeah. And it wasn't, I don't know if it's that they came from a bad place or if it was like, it was really hard for them to figure it out. And because they didn't entirely understand it, it was overcomplicated when they communicated it because they didn't have the understanding.
Yeah, that was a big piece of it. Because there was a time when nobody freaking knew anything.
Of course.
Right? And we couldn't just jump on YouTube to see how to do something. We couldn't do it.
I was telling somebody the other day, I remember when I would go on YouTube at that time and I would look up photo tutorials and like the only ones I found were like, there was this one guy who did the "You suck at Photoshop." Did you ever see those videos?
Yeah.
They were amazing.
Yeah,
I don't know what happened to that guy. But that was like the only thing that existed.
Yeah.
And so I like a lot of my early tutorials, like when I would figure things or when I would learn something, it wasn't from video, it was books or in-person classes. Even though the online medium existed, it just photography, believe it or not, there was a time before there were endless photo tutorials online.
Yeah.
So
really?
yeah. So I think part of it had to do with them not understanding. So when I started teaching, where I came from was a place of, oh, man, this took me forever to figure out whether I was learning from someone bad or it just took me experience. Let me cut out the crap. Let me get to the meat of the stuff. Let me make it easy. Let me save you time. And so I think that was also something people desired as well. It's like, save me time.
You're also speaking to a huge audience, right? With again, like the way that YouTube and everything else works today, as opposed to the way that it worked 15 or 20 years ago. Like, does it even occur to you to hold that leash, so to speak, and to be conscientious of who's listening and who might take what it is that you're teaching, and then it comes back and bites you? You know, like, I feel like that was a big piece too, is that people would only teach so much, and then they would hold a little bit of this and a little bit of that off to the side. Does that make sense too? And that doesn't happen so much anymore, does it?
No, it doesn't. It was 1,000% a thing. When I would first take classes, the first part of it was that they were always trying to sell something else. So they would give you like just a little bit and we're trying to push you to like, it's a teaser to the next thing.
Yeah.
But I personally would like to partially take credit for the industry changing to not holding things back.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm the only one. I'm certainly not, but
right.
I would answer any question as fully as I possibly could with any secret I possibly had. And so how I think of it is part of the reason, if you look at my work 10 years ago to now, it is in a different, it's not just like a different ballpark, it's a different state in a different ballpark. It's a different level.
Sure.
And I think it's because every time I would share a new technique or something I had discovered, well, I better go discover something new. I better go figure something out because either I need more to teach, or guess what? Everyone's going to catch up. So I got to keep pushing myself.
Right.
And I found it to be fantastic.
You were really
to push me.
self-motivated. Like you were motivated by yourself to push yourself further to keep on going, right?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so this is what I always ask people when we get to so here's my why question. Mm-hmm. We have the benefit of hindsight, of course, now 10 years later, 15 years later, to look back and say, this is how things were, this is what I did. Why were you that way? Because I do agree. I think you were one of the pioneers of pushing that movement, so to speak, at the time. But you didn't necessarily know that in the same way at the time that you do now, because it's 10, 15 years later. Why were you like that? Why?
It was from frustration of going to classes and feeling I didn't start off with money. So I would attend these classes, and even if it was $69 at the end, if I didn't come away with something or felt like they're holding back, like that $69, I just burned
$69. Yeah.
It's $69, it's still money. And so I would go to conferences, and there was a lot of times where I would sit through something and go, they could have told me more. They chose not to.
Yeah.
And it's because I went from the conference or the learning conference as like the attendee side into the teaching side. So I think it was just I relate to not wanting to waste time or money. I didn't have it. Like that $69 could have bought me XYZ towards my photo career, but I knew the value of education. Yeah. So I think it was that. And I also just, I think part of being young too is I don't feel threatened by people. Like when I was young, okay, we're medium now, solidly in the medium, not young. But at that point, I feel like you're not afraid of people stealing things from you when you're young. Like you're learning, you appreciate any knowledge that's bestowed upon you. So it's like, why am I going to be protective over things people gave me? Like it,
How much of, okay, so you kind of have your photographer, your creative photographer identity piece. I'm going to stumble through this part. And then you have this education piece, this educator piece, right? And they're distinct, right? But you even said earlier, they're also they're intertwined. It's not like they're completely separate from each other. Which one of those gets you up in the morning, or is it both of them?
So this sounds like a cop-out answer, but it depends on when you ask me. Because I think if I do any one of them too much, I get tired of one or the other. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that I don't love both of them. But if I shoot nonstop, I'm just exhausted because I've been producing. Mm-hmm. But if I teach nonstop, then I'm like, oh man, I want to get back to shooting. Right. So it's really is the kind of the balance between the two. And in a similar vein to that, now that I'm established enough, when I want to shoot something and have an idea for something creative, I can shoot that and make it be something that will educate people, whether it's a YouTube video or a tutorial or whatever it may be. So I can make them work together. But this is not exactly the question you asked, but just something interesting is when I first started in New York, I was basically told that I had to pick. I had to choose if I was going to teach or if I was going to shoot. And it could not be both. It had to be one or the other. And I felt like I had been told a lot of things that had to be before, so I kind of ignored people. It doesn't mean I didn't like...
You're like, yeah, I've heard this before.
Yeah, but like you always hear, like there's always things, like just, there's so many examples. Right. So I kind of said, well... let's just see. I'm going to do what I want to do. We'll see if I end up getting pushed or pulled one direction or the other, as long as I'm happy, cool. Yeah. But just to give you an example, like of how things all kind of loop together is, I shot before this all happened this year, I shot a big campaign for Morphe Cosmetics. Mm-hmm. And the way that they heard of me was not through my marketing side and like all the marketing materials I send out and not all the promotions and agents and things like that. Where they heard of me is the producer that worked from them previously was a producer for Creative Live in Seattle, moved down to LA. And then with her new job said, I know this great Photographer and then sent it over and it was a major campaign. Like,
and that's how
do
you
know what
got
I mean?
it.
So,
Yep.
so it's more about connections as well as your ability to produce and your ability to relate to people. And like, there's no one path to success. And when someone makes you feel like that and it just doesn't work for you, like, know that they're full of crap. Like there's always another way.
Well, and don't you think that the
end.
last 10 years, one of the other things that has happened, and I'm not telling, I'm throwing this out there, but in the last 10 years, I feel like one of the other things that has happened that's different from the 2000s is that the stigma surrounding someone that's educating as well as photographing has kind of been erased, in that I remember it used to be people were all concerned about, well, you know, I see that you're teaching. Do you really have a business still? Or how much of your income comes from teaching versus like actually photographing? And I'm not saying I'm not dismissing those inquiries as if they don't matter anymore, but it used to be a really big deal.
Yeah,
And now it's less than, because I think people understand kind of the relationship, the symbiotic relationship between the two of them that you're talking about. Don't you think?
Well, you also have the most successful people at the top of any of these careers and fields now teaching things like master classes. And so it's like,
yes,
so they're like, oh,
sure.
So teaching isn't crappy. Like, you know, people see it as you might be at the top of your field is why you're teaching.
Yes.
I think I do think it's twofold. I certainly think it for sure exists in the fashion realm at the highest echelons of like, you know, really exclusive designers and whatnot. I'm sure it's still a problem.
Yeah.
But I think brands now more want to know what you bring to the table. And sometimes your audience or your ability to communicate, which you gain from teaching, is more important to the service you're providing. Because sometimes I'm not just delivering photos. Sometimes I'm delivering photos with the behind the scenes videos, also with a live stream because they want content creators, not just photographers. So I think the needs have changed in the past decade.
So regarding success, success specifically, because success to me is always something that's so individual and so subjective, right? There's not like this blueprint that anyone can just subscribe to and say, yeah, that's what success is. For you, the last decade, you would consider it pretty successful for yourself, right?
Yes.
What does the next decade look like to you regarding that same vector? Like in 2030, when we sit down together and you say, yep, the 20s were really successful for me as well. What do you think that looks like over the next 10 years?
All right. So I have, we'll start off with the non-answer answer, and then I'll give you the real answer.
Love it.
The non-answer answer is, I think as many women and men in their 20s into early 30s will attest to, that the 20s are tough. Being in your 20s is, you don't know who you are, you don't know what you want, you don't feel success. I mean, not everybody, but it was tough. And you make some poor decisions, whether that's people you surround yourself or business decisions or personal, like it's all that, right? And I think I would say that I found like really like solid happiness around like 30 to 31, like that year of 30.
Yeah.
And so like I'll just giving away my age. I'll turn 35 in September, so in a couple months.
Okay.
So from 30 to 30, almost 5, I've just been reveling and going like, oh crap, this is what happiness is. Oh, this is awesome. Like, it's just that like looking around going like, oh, this is good. This like, I don't feel like I'm drowning. I don't feel like there's crappy people around me. Like it's just good. So part of what I would consider success, if you look over the next decade, if I look back and go like, I figured out what the happiness was and I kept the formula that maintained that for a decade.
Yeah.
And I think too many people require, and I've always been like this. I'm super ambitious, like crazy ambitious. I always want more, but I also realize that after like, you know, your whole life not feeling happy and then finding it, like there is value in just maintaining that. and keeping true to what that is. So that's the non-answer answer. But the more business side is I actually, part of me, I'm still expanding and want, bigger clients and whatnot on that side. But I have started to help some other creatives, non-photographers, to produce content for themselves as well. The ones that I see that are really superior educators that are at the top of their craft. So how I would like to view myself, equivalents in other realms, like makeup, for example. So I just helped two close friends of mine do their first formal tutorial. And so I would like to see that expand. And because I see there's a lot of crap on the internet, and there's a lot of bad education also. And this is not all influencers are crappy. I'm not saying that, but there's also a lot of education from influencers that's not helpful to people. So part of what I'd like my next decade to involve is putting out more educational content that's not just me, but working with other creatives that I think have a lot to offer.
Kind of a producer, even a mentor, so to speak, kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
You said something, or maybe you didn't mean to infer it, but it really sparked something in my mind when you were talking about in your 20s and into your 30s, and then you hit 30, and I don't know how you said it. I would have to go back and listen. But in my mind, here's what I was thinking. I wonder if she had to make some tough choices, especially relationally, during those years when everything is just starting to take off for you, right? Yeah. And I can relate to this a little bit when you have this, these relationships and this circle of friends and these people over here and these people over here. And you always, now you see those memes now that say, you want to look around when things are going well for you. You want to look around and see the people that are clapping. And you even want to notice more the people that aren't, like your friends, right? Like, who's not clapping for you? I got the sense, as you were just talking about all that you've had to make some tough choices relationally in those realms.
Oh, for sure.
Of course, no names. This isn't what that's about. But from a bigger, broader sense, what was that like for you as you're just taking off and not everybody's clapping for Lindsay?
Yeah. I have a specific time frame in mind where I had a lot of people that I felt that I owed a lot to because when I first got started, they were people that I worked with. Now, these may be personal relationships like boyfriend, whatnot, but it also could be I worked with a hairstylist, makeup artist, or there was somebody for sharing spaces, like just things like that, right? Yeah. And so even when objectively I was getting abused, like just treated like shit for so many different ways, I felt that I owed it to these people to continually give them more chances or to adjust my expectations to suit them. And so I have a very specific time frame where this is true. This is exactly what you're saying. I turned 30 and like my first couple of months of 30 were rough. Like it was a health issue and then there was relationship things and all this stuff. And then I hit a point where I did, I just massacred, got rid of people. And it was because when I got rid of the first one, it felt so good. Then I got rid of the second and then I got rid of the third. And so
that's perfect.
I'd never done it before. I never just cut, I canceled relationships. I canceled friendships. Which it sounds like I didn't value them, but I realized, they're toxic and it just lasted too long. And so if you look at me now, the people that I have in my life and that I value and interact with, there's basically one or two holdovers from that time. And it's not because I just stopped valuing people. It's that I realized the people that valued me. And then that was an important perspective to take into account.
Well, and then when I look back and I add that to what you were saying and kind of overlap those two things, it also seems to me like that led to that period of time that you're now in, where you realized what it was like to really be happy and look around and think, things are really going well. This is great. This is right. And that happened on the other side of kind of the bye Felicia moments where you're like on the other side of those relationship executions, so to speak, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And people everyone feels like this. And when I say abusive relationship, whoever is toxic to you on the other side, you go, oh shit, I should have done that sooner.
Really? Like that's the other thing, right? You wonder why you didn't, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now this is a pivot because that was really deep and heavy. Now I want to get into something a little lighter, and it's of course I go through my mind about all my own stuff, and I want to jump out of that because I'm freaking out a little bit. Okay, the creativity piece, right? So I have your Instagram feed pulled up. I've been looking at your Instagram stuff for years. I don't even know how long it's been, and I want to mention something about your imagery.
Yeah,
there's so much to them. Like when you read a really good book, right? And then you get to the point where you even read it a second time. I'm a reader, so I read books multiple times sometimes. And you pull so much out of it that you didn't even, how did I miss that the first time? When I look at your images on your feed, I look at them and then I go back and I sometimes look through again, right? And you do this with a lot of people, but I see new things or I notice new details, or it's like I have a different perspective. You have so much stuff packed in, and it's like every image too. Why is your stuff like that? I don't mean to say that there's an easy button that you can throw out there for people, but how would you talk about your own stuff in regards to what I'm saying to you? Okay,
so how I describe my style generally is that it is a clean, bold, and graphic style that portrays women in a way that is both strong and elegant. That is my elevator pitch. That's kind of the way I describe things. And that's what I use as my guiding principle. And so when it comes to let's talk clean, bold, and graphic. So let's do the clean and graphic. So in any of my shots, I want literally every pixel to be on purpose, whether that means every hair, every color, every tone, there's nothing that's by mistake, zero. Yeah. And the graphic element is in my compositions. It's in the makeup. It's in the way that I use contrast. I'm integrating that for the graphic element. And then the bold means I don't want you to ever look at my photo and go, okay, that's nice. There's got to be something that was pushing the edge a little bit, like the super saturated colors or the super high contrast black and white or the crazy makeup or something that was just a little bit beyond safe. And then for portraying women with strength and elegance, I don't do gritty and rough strength. I do the way I like to portray strength tends to be with dignity, which is why it's elegance and dignity hand in hand. So you don't, even when I photograph nudes, which I actually do quite often, they're never where they feel in the realm of glamour Playboy-ish. That's not, because that's, and again, not that that's not, a different way of photographing the nude, but it's not my vision and my style. Well, so it carries through whatever I do.
In my mind, I get what you're saying. Every pixel has a purpose. That is freaking perfect. But what I'm hearing you say, at least from my perspective, is, and especially as I scroll through your feed, I don't ever get the sense that any of your subjects are being exploited, ever.
Oh no, never.
And I don't mean that would even be on your radar. But sometimes you can look at someone's body of work, and you even mentioned it. I want to be just beyond, when you're talking about the boldness, just beyond safe, right? But you're not crossing a line into something where I ever see anything and think, oh, that I feel like an ickiness there. What I'm getting to is, because I sense that you're very intentional about that. How do you toe that line? How do you know, in the shoot, especially in real time, when to we're not going to go there, or we need to do this over here, or I want to make sure that I don't make this happen or do this. How does that work?
Yeah, I actually think, I'm not going to say it's easy, but it is easy in that it all has to do with intention. When you approach a shoot knowing your purpose intention, then you're not you're significantly less at risk of the cringe factor, as I like to call it, because I'm not in there for any nefarious purposes other than to make art. And I know when I come into it, what is this photo supposed to say and communicate? And then when I know that, then I know the lighting that supports that idea and the posing that supports that idea and the styling. And so it's never even something I have to think about. Like, I don't remember ever, I really genuinely can't remember looking at any of my photos after the fact and going, "Oh, I'm definitely not going to post that," because of like feeling it never even, they don't ever even get captured. Like, it never gets to that point.
Because you're prepared.
Yeah.
You go in ready. Yeah.
And I also think that's, and let's specifically talk about nudes in this case, since like that is what, where you're at risk of it most. I don't do sessions where I just have someone show up and then say like, "Okay, let's make art," which I understand why some people do, but I say, "Okay, today we're going to capture these 3 concepts." And so we're prepared. Everyone's on the same page. I don't just work with me and the model. There's usually hair and makeup. There's usually some sort of prop. And then if you diverge from that because you find your momentum moving in an exciting direction, I mean, I certainly do that. But it's never any surprises. Yeah, it's a lot of preparation.
Spontaneity without surprise. I kind of like that. You allow for it, but you're still prepared when you go into that space.
Yeah, I think people think spontaneous is you show up and you just make something, but that's not the case at all. You got to put good stuff in front of you and then evolve.
Right. Okay, so let's do this. Talk to me about Canon a little bit, and here's what I want to know. Canon's a big deal for you, and it is for me. It is for the industry in general. I get that. But I want to know something a little personal. Like you mentioned when you were a little girl or when you were in your teens and you're going to, Photo East and you're going to the Javits and it's this big, huge, and you walk in and it's this massive place and you walk over to the Canon booth and there's all these explorers of light. And of course, at the time, everyone's a man everywhere that you look. Now you are one, and you're a you're a high profile explorer of light within the explorers of light too, right? Like you're in this upper echelon of the upper echelon of people. What is it like for you now going, being able to remember that girl that would walk in and now that's you?
So when people ask me about some of my greatest, like what do you feel your greatest accomplishments or what are you most proud of? That's definitely near the top. Because it was a symbol, and it's a symbol of a level of accomplishment that I wanted to achieve. And so it's not that I think, hey guys, being sponsored by a brand is what validates your existence in life. Like I'm not like, I don't want that to be what I'm communicating, but it's something that I saw and that I admired and that I sought and then I got it, And so I remember, and like, granted, this is like at the time it was a little bit beyond perhaps what would be expected. But like when I was at that age, like in teens, I remembered, I approached the person that was in charge of the program and I said, how does somebody become an explorer of light?
Yes.
And I wanted to know this. And I don't blame him at all. He was like obnoxiously dismissive, but I'm sure he gets to ask that question a million times. I totally get it. Like everyone asks that question. Yeah. And he, after I pushed him a little bit, I basically got from him, you needed to produce a superior quality of photography. Yeah. Have superior level of education and have an audience that you bring along with you. Yeah. And so, to answer when people have that question, that is the answer. But having a little bit of insight into it gave me a roadmap of like, okay, I knew what my destination was. I didn't know how to get there. So now I'm going to focus on that. I love it. Yeah. And I'm not sure, like eventually he was around when I was working on trying to get in the door. And had more experience. I always wondered if he remembered when I approached him because it had been like, 7-8 years prior. Sure.
Okay. Now to keep on going with that, because of course it's a big deal that Canon has these new mirrorless cameras and the R5 in particular. And I read the specs on them and I just can't, like every time there's this there are these new cameras, your mind gets blown. And so once again, my mind is blown by just reading the specs. I haven't shot with one. I'm not a photographer. My wife is. And so she's the one that's, whose mouth is watering about this new gear. But I am a gearhead. And so I'd like to know from you, what's it like to shoot with the R5?
So I think one of the things I always try to urge photographers to realize is that obviously the whole purpose of gear is to make your job easier and for you to focus on it less. You should think about your gear less if it is good. It should not get in the way. And yes, there are gear nerds. I certainly fall into that category periodically. But I always approach it more as, what does this allow me to do, rather than like, what function does this have?
Okay. Fair enough.
And so what I love and was kind of obsessed with about the camera is that when I got it into my hands, so everything was kind of just shutting down for quarantine. And I knew that they had wanted some images for a launch. And so I called them up. I said, hey guys, I'm shooting tomorrow. It's my last day before I'm locking down. And so they overnighted me the camera, and the learning curve was 0. I didn't have a manual. I didn't call them up. I just fiddled around for 5 minutes, and then I shot all these burlesque images. They were very like Ziegfeld Follies.
Yeah.
And so basically,
super user friendly.
It was insanely user friendly, but gave me all of these capabilities that made me do my job easier. And I think that should be the whole purpose of any time there is an improvement. It should be something that you don't have to think about, but all of a sudden your job is easier. So for example, I love, and it is a massive step up, I love the face and eye tracking. It is fantastic. Fundamentally, the camera is like a 5D4 with an EOS R married, but then with like some of the features of like the 1DX. Like it just kind of put everything together and said, here's everything at once. Right. So the face and eye tracking is fantastic. And maybe a lot of portrait photographers, maybe they figured this out. I never did. I never ever figured out, let's shoot at 1.2, focus and recompose and get it in focus. Like I never was able to do that. Right. And so I've been shooting now in a way that I never had before. Like if you look at my work, you would never see narrow depth of field. You would never see something shot at 1.2. Sure. And I've been shooting at 1.2 all the time. I have a new project coming out in the next week or two where like the whole thing is like 1.2, 1.8, 2.0. So that's one thing.
But so this is an example where gear has allowed you to essentially seamlessly integrate a whole new look that you weren't easily or comfortably able to capture before. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, well, a perfect example is, and this is like mildly embarrassing, but a couple of years ago, like maybe 2-3 years ago, this was just before the EOS R, just before it came out. Yeah. I was shooting for an eyelash company, right? Fake eyelashes. And I was shooting, they're a good client. Like it's a lot of money every year. Yep. And so shooting, they wanted me to do kind of more of a lifestyle shoot outside on location. And I had like a Digitech. So we had I was shooting tethered and just checking the images. And they kept saying on the images, well, we want the background to be blurrier. And there's obviously a couple ways to do this, right? Yep. And so I would go through them, but one of them is, let's shoot at a wider aperture, obviously. Yep. And my Digitech, and if anyone doesn't know, basically the guy sitting at the computer checking the files, he's trying to communicate in code to me that I'm not nailing the focus. You're not getting in anything. Like no, off, nope. Because the shots that they liked were at like 1.8. Yeah. I just wasn't getting it. So my point is, like, it was terrifying. And this is like a big money shoot. And now it's just not something that would have to be stressed out about anymore. So
it's not a thing anymore.
No. And people like, this is the old people that go, you kids don't know how much easier it is these days. Well, like it'll be that in 5 years. We have no idea what it was like before shooting with face and eye tracking.
Well, but that's the beauty of it. Like and it's one of the reasons why I'm a gearhead, is because what you're talking about is ideal. You don't necessarily want to have to jump into something that's a gigantic learning curve, right? But if you can seamlessly transition into something that then as you're using it, you realize has all these amazing new capabilities or improved capabilities.
Yeah.
That's ideal.
Yeah. And I think this is where, in a lot of photographers that I'll teach, when they're trying to figure out how to use something, and I'm not just throwing some other brands underwater, but under the bus, but when they're going through menu systems and like can't find something basic,
you can't
and it's
find
just
it, right?
freaking buried, and like we're working together, and there's eight of us around trying to figure this out. Like
Right.
it's just not the case. Like
Right.
my lovely boyfriend upstairs, Chris Knight, he always makes a good example of like, he knows, for example, that for the price, some of the things that you'll buy from an Apple or like a Mac computer, it is not the most spec'd out. It is not the strongest, the most powerful, but it has a great user interface that can just make your life easier.
Yep.
So it depends on what you're choosing to value. And in this case,
it just works better. And how much does that mean? That means the world, right?
Yeah. So
okay,
there's that. But anyway, if you want to know other stuff that I was impressed by, one of the things I liked is that I was always freaked out for mirrorless with battery life being crappy. But the new camera actually has a battery that has, I don't know, their specs said something much lower. I think their specs said something like 600 shots. But I shot close to 1,000 before I had to switch. So I don't know like what I did differently, but I got through like 1,000 frames. But yeah, I think their specs are 600.
But it's nice to find out. It's nice to find out that they're giving you conservative estimates with their specs too. Like if they say totally. 600 and you're getting 450, you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, totally. Also, I love the video features. Now, I'm not a video shooter first and foremost, but there are a lot of times when it is a small piece of what a client wants throughout a day. Hey, we need 2 15-second Instagram story clips, which happens to me all the time. Like I shoot for this one skincare brand that in their shot list, 80% are stills. And then the last 20% is some type of social motion, and they're not in their budget hiring another huge video team. Right. So I need to have that. And, I'm probably not in the near future going to shoot 8K. There could be a reason, but I definitely shoot 4K for sure. Right. And as 4K 120. So for example, I have ones where like they're, spritzing lotion on their face, and now you can do like slow motion of things in the air or drips or whatever, which is actually useful.
But it wasn't very long ago that we were all saying, and I don't really shoot 4K right now, even though it was available. Totally. And now all of a sudden we're at that next level where now 4K is pretty normal, right?
It's very normal.
And 8K is coming right on down the pike. And so you have this R5 that already has that capability and can do it in spades, right?
Well, and the reason that I like that as well is people ask me all the time, maybe Canon wouldn't like this, but like, okay, well, what camera do I need? And I said, okay, well, what camera do you have? Yeah. And what do you think you're missing genuinely? Yeah. Yeah. And so this does give you the ability for this camera to be your go-to camera for longer, because and it's got 45 megapixels. So you're not going to need to jump up in megapixels.
No, you'll be fine.
As a high frame per second. You've got 8K video capability. So I feel like you should be able to buy it and hold on to it for really long time. Yeah. Especially since, periodically people do firmware updates and all that stuff.
Right.
So,
right.
And I think for what you're getting, I think the price is a good price. Yeah. But I understand thousands of dollars is a lot of money. And so you want to know that you're not going to be like, oh crap, I need to upgrade next year. You know
what? I saw it was like, I don't know, it's under $4. It's like $3,800 or $3,900 for the body.
Exactly.
And I thought, okay, here's you kids don't know what it's like. I spent like $8,000 on a Kodak 760 in 2002. Yeah. And the year before that, it was like $25,000.
I know someone who bought it at that price.
Right. For like we got like 3.2 megapixels, and we thought it was
insane.
A dream. Yeah. So here, that's my you kids don't know what it was like story. Totally. You know what? Where can you give out your information, your Instagram and your website, and anywhere that people can go to see you?
Yeah. So if you want to see my work, and I update it most regularly, it's Lindsay Adler _photo on Instagram. And then if you wanted to see my portfolio, kind of the body of work, it's lindsayadlerphotography.com. And then my educational site is learnwithlindsay.com.
Lindsay, this was an absolute pleasure. I am honored that you would choose to do this. I really appreciate your time.
You are a fabulous interviewer. I get lots of these where they're not actually listening and they just have a list of questions. So I appreciate that you engage and ask great questions.
I had 2 questions on my list.
No, you did a great job.
2 that I wanted to get to. So I appreciate you saying that. Have a great day and enjoy your time this week.
Thank you. You too. I'll see you at the next event someday.
Whenever.
Totally. Thanks.
Hey guys, thanks for watching this conversation presented by White House Custom Color on YouTube. Be sure to check out our other content and click that subscribe button right there. Right. Right there. It's there somewhere.